So it's now time to invite Alison. I know you don't like long introductions, Alison, and judging from the number of people that you have met both last time and then this time, you've probably met everyone in the room anyway, but just a reminder to those who haven't yet, Alison's from Mars, the Discovery District in Toronto, and is the McConnell Foundation's Senior Fellow in Social Innovation. So we're all very excited to hear your reflections on this second visit, Alison. Please welcome her to the stage.
Okay, I don't know who can live up to all that hype, but I'm going to give it a shot. And listen, thank you so much for bringing the Canadian weather here today. Brilliant. It's cold, but I'm here and I'm ready. Okay, so what's changed since I've been here in May? Can I reposition this a little bit so I can see it? Yeah, thank you so much. So what has changed? Well, I'm going to tell you what has changed. A lot. And with all due respect to Alicia Keys, this girl is on fire. Thank you for laughing. Thank you for laughing. I've told so many people, it's kind of like a joke. Can you laugh? And so thanks very much. But seriously, there's been so much that has changed. I mean, really, I hear that you moved an entire hospital and it went well. Right? I hear that you had 2,000 people from an astronomical, what are these guys? They're like really important astronautical folks. I hear that you had this guy called Elon Musk, which your premier has kind of a man crush on happening there, right? And I hear the submarines are coming. Again, in all seriousness, when I was here last, people said things like, we're not Melbourne. We're not Sydney. And I kept going, but what are you? And now people say, we're about 1.4 million people. We're a mid-sized city. Like, if you put us in the U.S., we'd be like one of the top 10. We got lots of stuff going on here. Like, there's really something that's changed. There's something in the zeitgeist. So for those of you that heard me speak last time, yeah. I did mention that you can't get back into Canada unless you show a picture of Trudeau. So this was kind of, a kind of scene out of like Love Actually, right? Where, Trudeau took on Trump and we were so proud of him. But you too had your Love Actually moment, right? Okay, very good. I love this video and I hope you all know what I'm talking about. So thank you for indulging me. So now let's get on to some of the fun stuff. So great things are happening, but as we've heard, there's people being left behind, and we can't get complacent. And I would argue that to those of us fortunate enough to live in Toronto or Adelaide, to those of us who much is given, much is expected, I think the world is watching us, and it's really incumbent upon us not to get complacent. This is from Hassel Architect. 50% of their staff bike to work. They've got environmental impact, they've got health impact, and they figured out this creative, innovative way right inside their room where they can put this up. There are tiny little innovations that we can do to make things happen every day and in every way. So what I'm going to do is take a design systems approach. I have about 10 big topics that I want to cover, and I'm framing it around how might we. This photo was taken from your amazing art museum, and these slides are a little bit of like my home movies, because they're all pictures from Adelaide, so I hope you will bear with me. But I love this framing because really what we're looking for is a kind of paradigm shift here. So hopefully you will find the pictures wonderful and some of the insights helpful as well. So first of all, how might we create the conditions for South Australia to thrive in the purpose economy? And you've heard how David defined it. How do people, regardless of where they live and work in South Australia, contribute to and benefit from better social and economic outcomes? That's really what we're trying to do here. Jobs. Jobs comes up all the time. So let's talk about jobs for just a moment. When I met with the governor, he said, we have this problem. We have lots of jobs here. We have lots of people who won't take those jobs. I don't understand why we've got such a high rate of youth unemployment. So I'm an immigrant to Canada. I was born in Northern Ireland, but he's an immigrant as well. And this is beyond his sort of realm of thinking. And it seems really simple. Like, we have a jobs mismatch. What is going on here? Well, of course, it's a complex challenge. It's not as simple as it sounds. Who was here for Indy and Ingrid's presentation? Anybody? Some of you. So you saw what Ingrid talked about. Ingrid is from TAFE, the Australian Centre for Social Innovation. And she talked about really how it's so much more complex than just having a job and having someone who just won't take that job. So one action area that I thought about is, how do we build on what works? And there's the Northern Housing Service. It's a pilot project to support the long-term unemployed. It's one-on-one. It's deep and it's meaningful, and it'll make an impact. So we really have to watch that. And I just wanted to talk for a second about action areas. As you heard from me and from David, I've been asked to give you some areas for action, things that you can do and things that you can think of. But I would also encourage you to rest in the problem as long as you can, and to embrace ambiguity. When you're dealing with complexity, the tendency for all the problem solvers in this audience to rush and fix things is great. Our job is not to do that. So these are ideas that you can play with, and they're concepts, but please put them in that kind of a context. As Indy said, there's no silver bullet, which is really annoying, right? Because we just want to fix these things, but there's not. It's about learning together. It's about resting in the mess. What else can we do? Well, how about this? How about a tripartite solution where the person who's experiencing unemployment, the employer, and the community service agency can all come together? Because it's really in the best interest of the mushroom farm to get and retain talent, because they're going through like crazy. And there's a cost. Everybody knows there's a cost of attracting, and that's the HR kind of costs around that. And we also know the community service agencies understand the complexity of people's lived experience and how they sometimes have generational poverty, or they have addiction issues, or they have been beaten down because of intergenerational poverty that they've had to deal with over and over again. They know how to deal with that. And nobody knows the experience of how to deal with this better than the person with lived experience. So why don't we create opportunities for those three groups to come together to problem solve and figure it out, instead of othering or blaming those, what's wrong with those corporations? Why don't they just get it together? Or blaming the person who's unemployed, chronically unemployed. We really need to have a much more complex attempt at this. So that's something for us to think about. The next insight is that we really need to put power, both economic and otherwise, into the hands of Aboriginal people. And Rosemary, thank you so much for your kind welcome to country. It was incredibly touching, and I agree with you 100% that there's so much that we can learn from what's happened in the past. We're kind of fascinated by bright, shiny objects. We run over there. But in fact, it's about taking the time and honoring where we've come from before we know where we're going. So I deeply appreciated your words. So let's see what's going on in this case. Well, we need to actually think about how are we sharing resources and assets and understanding them. And so a possible action area is to use something called Positivedeviance, where we go into communities and understand what's working, not what's not working. When people studied social work, they were told they were smart and they had the answers, and they'd go work with people that needed their help and they'd get fixed. What? It doesn't work on so many levels for so many reasons. And actually, we don't have the answers. We have to figure it out together. But the Business Model Inc. is working with someone called Donna, who some of you may know, who's currently working at Taxi, to play around with what this actually means, to understand what's working in communities and build from that around economic opportunities for persons who are Aboriginals. It is not up to you or I to stand back and point. We have to do our own work in understanding this issue, and we have to see what people want to do to uncover their strengths. Interestingly, we heard from someone from the University of South Australia who teaches entrepreneurship, and he said he's never had an Aboriginal student. Never. So I think we need to do work on both sides to create opportunities, and it's really, again, our obligation to do the work. It's not up to folks to teach us. Next area, how might we encourage innovation in and across sectors? So looking quickly at each of these sectors, I have a quick insight and a quick suggestion for us to consider. Government is keen to innovate, but faces limitations, particularly those imposed by electoral cycles, and you're seeing it happening now. We're caught in the tyranny of announceables. And one of the things that Indy talked about was Mariana, I don't know how to pronounce her last name, Mazzucato, and who wrote a book called The Entrepreneurial State, which I really encourage you all to read, particularly folks who work in the public sector and government. So many innovations came out of government. Really, seriously, so many innovations came out of government, and we've just beaten them down and told them that it's not about them. It's really only the private sector that innovates. It's not true. Tons of innovations have come out of the public sector, both nonprofits and government, and I really encourage us to revitalize that. So what are the action areas? Well, we can build on and evaluate the impact of promising practices. I don't know if is Gail in the room? Oh, hi, Gail. So Gail is well, I love Gail, but this is one of the many things that she's carrying on to Fund My Neighborhood, and it's really about participatory budgeting. So let's go really deep in understanding what's happening there. Who's really applying? Who's really getting the projects? We have so much to learn, and this is a really wonderful example for us to go deep on. Procurement. There's huge opportunities. Government spends a lot of money. So social procurement is a huge opportunity, and let's go deep on understanding that. And then finally, using designated areas within government to focus on integrated innovation. If you're working in the public sector and you think innovation is synonymous with technology, then we have a problem, right? We need an integrated innovation approach. It needs to be both social and economic as just two sides of the coin. Because what often happens in the world of innovation is technology gets all the money because it's got the bright, shiny objects. But in fact, it's all about people. And so how do we bring both the wonderful technology that's going to make our life easier, and I'm as addicted to my iPhone as anybody, and the ability to look at how are we lifting as we climb. So let's think about and approach integrated innovation. So these are two guys that were just, this is a slide from Canada. The guy over there, does anybody know who it is? There's Paul Polman, who's the CEO of Unilever. And the other guy is Gavin Armstrong, who runs an organization called Lucky Ironfish. Again, it's pretty easy to beat up on the big corporates, and God knows the Unilever's had their challenges. He says all the right stuff, and it's up to us to hold him accountable to what he says. So if you think, for example, what they're doing with the Dove brand and women's self-esteem, they want all their brands to have a social purpose. Every brand to have a social purpose. And he was very big on the development of the SDGs, Sustainable Development Goals. He's meeting Gavin Armstrong. Gavin is a young guy who developed something called Lucky Ironfish. So Gavin went to Cambodia. He found out that there's huge rates of anemia there. And he came up with this block of iron and said to the women, will you please put this block of iron into your cooking water? And they said, crazy white kid from Guelph, Ontario? I don't think so. It's not happening. And so he experimented with different cultural approaches, and they said, oh, well, the fish is kind of happy. So he played with this concept of a happy fish. It was a little bit better, but not quite. And then he finally came up with this concept of the lucky ironfish. And he went back to the women and said, would you put the lucky ironfish in your water? And they're like, absolutely, absolutely we will. The rates of anemia are plummeting. This is a local source of iron. It's being carved out by people who are landmine victims. It's an amazing product. Why does Gavin Armstrong get to chat with Paul Polman? Because Paul Polman is deeply interested in what these kind of inventions are, what's happening on the ground, and how Unilever can take advantage of them. So we've got to encourage these kind of connections. We've got to encourage these folks to get in on the ground, so there's a receptor capacity for these cool innovations whenever they're ready to go to scale. Gavin is a pretty amazing young man, and I think I just love what he's doing. I bought a Lucky Ironfish for my son who went to university because he lives on Kraft dinner. Mac and cheese, do you have that? It's not the best for you. And so it's a buy one, give one free kind of model. So yes, Bailey's right here. Hi, Bailey. And so it's a kind of product that I think is going to be really wonderful and really scale. So a cool thing. You can buy one here. The next action area is around helping implement the Make It Work report by Deloitte. So I'm hoping you've all read this. They've talked a lot about the kind of thing, talent that Mia talked about and Mia referenced in her work, and they're finding out that actually when it comes to complacency, we shouldn't be complacent because we do have some burning platforms. Manufacturing declining, we all know about Holden and what's happening up there. The thing is, we need a strategy to attract, retain, and return top talent to South Australia. And this report is really worth reading, and it's worth following their work, because it's made in Adelaide for Adelaide. The other thing is looking at B Corps. There was a session here on B Corps, which some of you may have been at. So I think it's incumbent upon us to explore these new kind of models. They're not for everybody. Lots of these are niche instruments, but it's a kind of trend that's happening that I think you might find interesting exploring. We've heard about Bendigo Bank or their community bank, where 80% of the proceeds go back to community. They're one of those leaders in creating shared value that David talked about. But it's about establishing trust with community. I always like to say, people talk about B2B, like business to business, or B2C, business to consumer. At the end of the day, I'm pretty sure it's P2P. It's all people to people. And we've got to figure out how to get this kind of trusted opportunities to work together so we can get to new opportunities to bring our whole self to this really exciting work. Another insight was we got to go visit a small business, Pickfords. Like Pickfords does everything. We know them for cordial, right? They have craft beers. Who knew? Did you know? Yeah, they have, they do Beresford wines up there. They have so many different things. In fact, they put into place about 120 innovations annually. Innovation is in their DNA. It's what they do. So what's the insight? Look how much I love you guys. I'm actually showing this picture. Rose was also in this picture. I took her out because I'm just being kind to her. But so we need to work with SMEs to help them realize opportunities in the impact economy, just as they've seen from technological innovation. See, this is the lovely Rose right here. See, Rose, I took you out of the picture. Sorry. But it was really an amazing opportunity. And you know what we found out? We're in this warehouse. There is very, very, very few people in that warehouse. Everything is automated. Everything is perfect and aligned, and they have these vehicles that have lasers on them, and they stop at a certain point. And it used to be they lost about $350,000 a year to human error in the warehouse. Now they lose less than $1 a year. You can't compete with that. You have to understand, you have to meet these folks where they're at and understand how embracing the technology has fundamentally changed them and create opportunities to use that innovation that they honestly believe is in their DNA to open new opportunities that benefit all of us. There's some really interesting work, and actually Indy is doing some interesting work with folks in the cordial industry and other places, and we can really learn from that. But meeting them where they're at, meeting them where they know and believe their DNA is. So I had a chance to go up to McLaren Vale wine country, and it was pretty awesome. So what do we need to do? We need to celebrate and purchase from those companies who use innovation to live and work their values. Inkwell was a farm that I ran into, and this is my favorite quote from them. So I like what you're doing, Allyson, but we don't talk about it, we just do it. It's who we are. And they are bringing shipping containers. They believe that shipping containers are the real emblem of the wine industry in Australia. I keep saying Canada's 4th largest importer of Australian wines. Keep them coming, like it's super important. But really, it's super critical that we give people the opportunity to live and work these values, and it's up to us. We have the power of consumers to make our choices to support them. Another insight. While the NDIS has been dramatically disruptive, many folks are embracing innovation, in fact, are ahead of the game, and there's some pictures of people right around the table who are doing it, and I'm proud that they're all part of the sponsorship like Helping Hand, Royal Society for the Blind, Meals on Wheels, and Community Living Australia, Mark's going to be on our panel. There's huge opportunities there. So what are the action areas? To further embrace areas for innovation that lead to increased impact. Both front end, which is triage, so how do we think like a system? So there's a way in that's very clear, and then back end, shared service models. One of the things that came up the last time we met was people were saying, we share about 1/3 of our staff, and yet We trained them all, and it was Fiona. Hi, Fiona. It was Fiona who brought that up. And one of the things that was happening was that everybody trains everybody on first aid. Everybody trains everybody on health and safety, and we don't think like a system. And so finding new ways to do that is going to be incredibly helpful in enabling us to be innovative and user-centric. If anything, if we're not making life better for those with disabilities, we shouldn't be doing this work in the first place. So putting the user right at the center, we have huge obligations to think differently. Our job is not actually to keep our own organization alive. Our job is to serve the people who need it. We met with the creatives. It was our most lively session. They're a lot of fun. But one of the things that came up, this quote came up, which is that some top talent creatives are reluctant to move to Adelaide in case they will be forgotten. Listen, you have amazing, amazing artists here. This is Kai Lu. He is one of the hugely successful global artists that lives right here in Adelaide. Focus on the livability of this city. Grow community through uncurated events like the Fringe. And I've spent a lot of time thinking about the Fringe because people keep talking about how it's the second largest uncurated event after Edinburgh, I believe. Now, what's going on in this uncurated kind of space? I think ultimately it's about citizen engagement. And if you are doing this so well, you are greatly positioned for different forms of citizen engagement. We need to engage these creatives in what we're doing to solve problems. They will bring a new angle that others may not think of. So think about the university capacity you have, the business capacity you have through SMEs, corporates, or otherwise, the creatives, the nonprofit sector. We're deeply positioned for success. It's up to us to figure that out. So speaking about the universities, there is some great disruption going on there as well, from massive open online courses to things like flipped classrooms where you watch a video that the teacher made at home and then you go into the classroom for discussion. We have to think differently because Adelaide is a global attractor of talent that goes into universities. I think we're underutilizing that talent. We think, yay, we got more money from foreign student fees. We don't think about what an asset these students are to us and how they could be linked back to the diaspora and how we could connect our organizations that way. So I think there's a huge opportunity there. There's also prizes like the Hult Prize, which is $1 million prize that students can compete in. You may love it or you may hate it, but $1 million prize to help tackle, this year it's on energy, does get students who don't normally think this way to think about opportunities. So I would encourage Adelaide, and I want to see you in the finals this year. Well, maybe next year. I'll give you a year to get up to speed. I also think that there's huge opportunities within vocational schools like TAFE. People talked a lot about what comes out of TAFE. They were encouraging, though, that people should not just come out with skills as a hairdresser or a mechanic or whatever it may be, but in fact they should come out with business and operational skills because lots of people become their own entrepreneurs, sometimes immediately, sometimes down the pipe. I would say those skills are absolutely needed along with what I would call 21st century skills, design thinking, systems thinking, integrating all of that so that we're not creating these different classes that are siloed and apart. And here's the deal. Students are the levers of change. Our job is to listen to them. So I would love to see us create these deep listening opportunities to the students. I would love to see more industry, university partnerships and embracing these global challenges that I mentioned. Number 3, how might we ensure the social purpose ecosystem is connected and well positioned for success? Those of you that were at the showcase might have seen this. This is the founder of Mars who says it is amazing what you can get accomplished when you don't care who gets the credit. And that's really hard to do because we're incentivized to say, I did that. But if we can get beyond that, it is amazing what we can unlock. And I would encourage us to try to find some spaces to make that happen. What do we need to do? We need to support and upskill the intermediaries whose expertise in bringing the whole system into the room needs to happen for collaboration and co-creation. The thing is, it's super hard to do. And that's why I've given you a couple of books. You have reading as well. One is called Creating Great Choices, which is about negotiating differently. And the other one is about collaborating with the enemy, by a guy called Adam Kahane from Rios Partners, which is really how do you get along with people that you don't really get along with for the purpose of realizing a joint and shared vision. It's pretty wonderful. I think that Adelaide has so many great components. What we lack is these network weavers. We have some, we have Taxi, we have BMI, and we need to continue to work with them and support them. But this is the kind of skill that we need. We need to create these kind of opportunities for people to sit above the system and make connections and linkages that those deep in the system can't see or do. Following right from that, how might we create spaces for experimentation that brings together new and unusual stakeholders to realize social and economic impact? So my friend Sharon from Meals on Wheels said some great quotes here. I just want to pick up one of them. Business as usual burns all the fuel. How do we find the time and the space to have these kinds of conversations? How do we find the time and the space to look up and to look out and not be caught in looking down? And it's really hard to do, but you need a deep intentionality around that. In fact, it's not acceptable not to. And again, our friends from Taxi, they've had to relocate some of their tenants to use their space for collaboration, which is a really good sign. There's so much demand now for these spaces where people can come together and have new creative conversations. Like imagine a space where you could respectfully come together with someone and disagree with them and not other them, not the political discourse, which is right or wrong or left or right, whatever it is. We really need new kinds of spaces to discuss with respect, to figure out a common agenda. And I think the most value is that we go on a learning journey together. No one in the room has all the answers, but collectively we'll figure it out. And that learning journey creates a very wonderful bond that helps us break through the othering. That's the insight. And of course, we have Tonsley and we have Stretton Center, and both of these are beginning to think like a system, how one can help feed into the other, and it makes tons of sense because really we need to get beyond just geography and think about what the whole system could look like. My favorite topic. How might we realize the opportunity provided by the old Royal Adelaide Hospital site to build social and economic impact? Insight. Decision was made. The state has decided to manage the redevelopment of the old RAW themselves. Why? Well, we could ask, but it does seem the kind of things that come up are, there's the heritage component, there's the parklands component, there's the housing fear, there's the fact that commercial in general had a very comprehensive proposal, but none of the public saw it because it was all kept private. It was a very interesting decision, but it's made, and so now it's up to us to figure out what are we going to do about that. It is my deep wish that we can create a multi-sectoral collaborative that can realize the opportunities provided by the old RAW. This could be our physical manifestation of innovation in the CBD. It could be what we need to come together to do everything from commercialization of research to having those difficult conversations. We can focus on areas that mean the most to Adelaide and to South Australia, and it's too precious a resource to let go. But if I've lost, then I want you to think about what are other places in Adelaide where this can happen. Or maybe Adelaide itself becomes the test city. Maybe Adelaide itself is the site for these kinds of things to come on. I'm really keen to see what happens when I come back in 9 months with this site. How might we build the entrepreneurial ecosystem that integrates social purpose into its development? What you have here is this resource by Paul Daly, and he's got a desire to build on the foundation that he established. He's actually creating an interactive 3D version of the map. It is not going to be fit for purpose. So for example, this was built for a very specific reason. Paul's opened, having people having people open to revise it and think about what it could be used for. But if you could search for social or search for technical or search for something else, this would be a useful resource to leverage. We need to ensure that the purpose economy is integrated into the emerging startup ecosystem. There are lots of amazing startups creating social impact. Test Kitchen, which is using food to create ways of belonging. Push Adventures, which is about tourism for persons with disabilities. They want to get beyond charity. They want to scale out, up, and deep. And if you remember our discussion from last time, we've talked about not just replication as a means of scaling, but scaling up through policy and scaling deep through things like culture change. The market is one lever of change. We are not going to get to systems change by pulling only the market, but it is still an important lever, and it is still something for us to think about. And we want to integrate, we want to go, in my opinion, to where the money is. We want to go to where the energy is and leverage it, because we have to, again, meet people where they're at and get them to think about, if you're creating a business, how could it have social impact and make money? Not as an add-on, but integrated right up front. And there's huge opportunities in that. Indy calls this, he has a term called system ventures, and I think there's huge opportunities there to think about ventures using a systems lens. Talent. Talent is a huge issue. How might we grow talent that will position us for success in the 21st century? See, this is the home movies part. So here's two kangaroos. One's inside the fence and one's outside. One is already left. And as you heard from David, the 15 to 34-year-olds are leaving in droves. Well, those are the ones starting families. Those are the ones that we want to keep in Adelaide. We have to figure out a way to keep this talent here. And again, I'd refer you back to the Deloitte report. Rob DeMonte, who I'm so honored is chairing the Social Capital Residency, has taken on a job with a very complicated title, but it's got coordination in it, which I hear is the only important title. And what Rob says is there are going to be 10,000 more jobs as a result of the NDIS if we do it right. How do we make these jobs jobs of choice? How do we not say these are, terrible jobs and, you have to work there, that's really... We have to really rethink what young people want and how they can be attracted to these fields. And we have to rethink how wonderful and valuable and honorable it is to care for someone else. If we're not caring for each other, we are missing a huge opportunity. And I think there's a narrative and a reframing here that we must embrace to make these the jobs of choice. Another action area, of course, is to explore how SA is the place for young talent, especially those interested in impact. And this is from the radio station, the NGO radio station. Radio Adelaide. I heard it's Radio Adelaide in my voice. So anyway, there's an amazing young talent there, and I was so impressed with them and what they're doing. Here's another action area. My friend Moira is in the audience, and what Moira said I just loved. I fell for the problem. The lack of gender diversity in boardrooms, startups, and venture capital. The business case is clear. Diversity equals dollars, equals growth. So an action area is to continue to put a gender lens on the purpose economy to ensure that it is in fact inclusive. It is just dumb not to do this. There's so much talent. You don't want to use only half of your talent. You want to create opportunities to maximize that input. Next, how might we measure our impact? This weighs heavy on the sector. That was kind of a pun because I have a picture of a thing there. It's really challenging. Everybody talks about this no matter where you go. How do we demonstrate our impact? How do we measure our impact? And it's not, there's no easy answer. There's, things out there like social return on investment that may work for some. There's other opportunities, but I think it's incumbent upon us to access and leverage global metrics like the Sustainable Development Goals. We have to think about What's happening globally that we can be a part of while owning this work locally? Some of you will have heard me say it's critical for us to keep our feet grounded in the soil and reaching for the Southern Cross. I used to say Northern Star, but I'm way better now. So there is real opportunities here to leverage those and to use them. What is another action area? Support the work of the Social Impact Measurement Network and the What Works Centres. What Works Centres are a global movement coming out of the UK where we actually find out where there is things that have worked and how we don't have to reinvent it, how we don't have to keep making the same mistakes. And I would encourage people in South Australia to look at setting up a What Works Centre. And I'm keen to see if that's something that you think would work in our context here. How might we create access to capital for those seeking to create economic and social impact? You will be surprised there's not unanimity on this voice. We need to create a culture of philanthropy. Philanthropy is not the answer. We need to pay more taxes to get a fairer society. There is a lot of money in South Australia looking for quality deals. I can't find any financing for my idea. Every one of these things is a tiny bit true. I think we do need to grow a culture of philanthropy in South Australia. I think there's huge opportunities for people to use their money to make a social impact. I think some people honestly believe that more taxes is the answer, and I think you pay lots here, and lots of people are willing to do that because you have one hell of a quality of life. I do think that both are important. I think there's lots of money floating around looking for deals. I just don't think there's anybody connecting them to the deals in any real and meaningful way, although that's beginning to happen. So again, the theme comes up around connection, lack of connection. There's tons of diversity, but there's tons of opportunity. So this is a woman by the name of Rosemary Addis, who's based in Melbourne, and she runs Impact Investing Australia. She's setting up a $300 million wholesale social finance fund. Don't set up something here. I would suggest that you want to work with her. You want to leverage the work of this global leader. She's very involved in the G7 work, and I think there's a huge opportunity to see what's happening, because the reality is there's going to be a massive intergenerational transfer of wealth coming our way. You want to take advantage of that. You want to figure out how younger people who are living and working their values and want to invest their values are going to see some money flowing to Adelaide. Some people think it's time to think beyond impact investing, and I agree. I think that there's huge opportunities to not just accept small piles of money, but to actually think really big, to go after the big superannuation funds, to go after those other folks that have excess money and figure out how we're getting some of that. We don't ever want to sit in the cheap seats. Those days are done. Another action area, of course, is to evaluate the work of Pay for Success or social impact bonds, which some of you may know, and the impact of the move from outputs to outcomes. You're going to hear that all the time. We don't care about outputs. Outputs is bums and seats. We care about outcomes. What does that really mean? There's other instruments like community bonds. I'm happy to talk about all of these, and layered finances. We have to think about all of this, but really the key factor here for me is what is the intent of something like Pay for Success, or what is the intent of something like a social impact bond? Is to allow for more innovation. And if we can keep that front and foremost and not get caught up in all the niche instruments and the tiny details about how that loses us, if we can keep the intent at the forefront, then there's some huge opportunities there. How might we communicate opportunities in the purpose economy? We met with Brand SA. They're willing to have us work with them much more closely to communicate what we mean by the purpose economy. They're willing to work with us on brand hierarchies or an overarching brand for Adelaide. They came up with this on the spot when we started to talk about what we were doing. They said, you know what, you're really saying there's more to life. And in Adelaide, you offer more to life. And again, when Mia talked about the pace of change and the opportunities for Adelaide, there's lots there to think about. So I'm interested to hear your feedback on there's more to life. I also met with tons of folks who were doing communications. Community Nation did a presentation here, Story Catchers, and of course Brand SA. We need help with a compelling narrative because we don't want to just talk to ourselves, right? We don't want to preach to the choir. So what are the opportunities to engage new audiences, speak their language? And we need the expertise of the communications professionals to help us do this. So I want to take the challenge from Open State, which is to turn your ideas into action. But I want to start with a change in mindset. If we're going to make this happen, that's where we have to start. The approach is to move from a scarcity mindset to an asset-based one. Start by mapping assets, your people, your places, and things. Approach, look up and look out. A possible action area, learn from adjacencies. This is one of the many, many, many whiteboards that we wrote on over the past few weeks. And someone said, you know what, we should think like that One World Alliance, like the airlines. There's opportunities to learn from adjacent industries. That's why engagement of others who think differently from us could be brought into this. Of course we can learn from them. Default to open, to sharing, to communicating. Challenge areas where you see this is not the default position. Embrace data. You say data, right? Data, embrace data. Determine key sources of data and unlock them for analysis and use. We have so many unused resources. This is the business model for Uber and all those guys. We are just as smart. We have unused assets everywhere. We have underutilized assets everywhere. We talked about them in terms of the students. Let's figure that out. Let's figure out a way to take advantage of those and help them work together for this collective impact. Value the role of network weavers and brokers, building the capacity of the intermediaries to broker between the supply and the demand of innovation. We spend a lot of times talking about building startups and all of those enterprises. We think very little about the receptor capacity for that innovation. Where is it going to go? You need someone who's going to connect both supply and demand, and there's huge opportunities there. And timing. I value and, not just or. I value being patient and impatient. We need to recognize that innovation works in an erratic timeline. We have to embrace that. We have to think about what are we going to do, when are we going to be patient, when are we going to be impatient, and when are we going to embrace it. Both are critical. And then finally, I want to throw some of your own words at you. This is on a wall in the neighborhood where I'm staying up at Lincoln College. Remember, the happiest people are not those getting more, but those giving more. My final slide is that I honestly believe you have everything you need to succeed. You have everything you need to bring your whole selves to this work. The fact that you've let me play a mirror, a catalyst, a sparking role honors me more than you will ever know. Thank you so much.